afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the Special Board and Education Business Committee meeting to order for Thursday, April 7th. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. First item of business, the adoption of the agenda. I'd just like to recognize that Trustee Doman has informed us he's going to be arriving by 4:30, but we haven't heard yet from Trustee Croft. So, motion to adopt the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Trustee.
So many years of. Okay, business and operations. Are you presenting or is it?
I am.
So same place.
Thank you. I'm going to start my presentation with introducing you to the third member of our budget team. You know that Karen and I work on the budget, but we also have another member, Nicole Brown, who I've asked to just join us here today to observe the board working on budget discussion. So she's here, and welcome, Nicole. Want to start out with introducing the budget. We're talking about the purpose of this meeting, which is to discuss options for addressing the shortfall that was previously brought to the board at earlier meetings for the 2016-2017 budget year. And I want to emphasize that what I'm about to present are ideas for early consideration at this point. The board are going to hear options for the first time this evening. There have been no decisions on these options by the board to date. Regrettably, there'll be items on this list that won't be popular. They're not popular with us. They won't be popular among our employee groups, recognizing that 90% of our budget is wages and salaries. For the first draft of these options, we've tried to bring forward as many items as we can that attempt to minimize the impact on staffing. And the option list is not a list of the value of any of the programs that may be here. All the work done by our employees and all the programs we know are of value to our system. Many of the options are still very much in development phase, so they'll be presented at a very high level today. The details of the hows will come later on. So starting there.
And just for the information of the public, we're receiving this for the first time as well.
So what I've got here, and this is a slide that the BEBC have received before, and it has been revised with the most recent announcement of April 4th, which provided us with more fuller funding on our wage settlements. So it is now down from $3.665 million to $3.7 million. So that's our new starting point. So we got the funding announcement on Monday that said that we would receive an additional $395,000, and have now incorporated that into the shortfall. So just an update on that slide, which we've seen before. So again, to review why the shortfall is so large for 2016-2017. Key reasons are a reduction in our provincial revenue, so we came out of funding protection. Therefore, we are down on money received from the province. We balanced our budget for the 15-16 year using surplus funds. We'll have that potentially as an option as we move forward in this presentation for next year, not the same number. We also had expenditure increases, wages, supplies, inflation, next generation networks, just a review of why we have a budget issue. So how will decisions on where to reduce the budget be made? The survey, partner groups, and public comments will guide the board in their decision making. Our survey closes on April 10th to allow time to consolidate the feedback, so that's this weekend. We have over 100 responses at this point, which I think is good or not, depending on how you look at it. It's certainly more people than we have come out to a public meeting, where we had a total of, I think, five individuals at our public meeting. So a good response we have from the survey in comparison to public meeting. So 90% of our district budget is tied to salary and benefits, and knowing that, we know that a large portion of our shortfall will have to come from labor costs. The biggest area of our budget is teacher salary and benefits, so it will require some adjustment to our student-educator ratio, I believe, to balance the 16-17 budget. So some options to deal with the shortfall. We're opening with a shortfall of 3.27 million. And the first item I want to talk about is at the board meeting on Tuesday, I brought forward an amended surplus projection of 844,000. It's a best guess of where we're going to be at the end of the year. And we will have our February enrollment count hopefully firmed up soon, because that makes up part of that 844,000. So I brought forward, for the purposes of these options, bringing forward some of that surplus, most of that surplus, really almost all of that surplus, into the 16-17 year to assist in balancing. So that's kind of an easy one.
Any questions as we go through?
I can stop at each one if people want to ask questions about them.
So, does that leave less than $100,000 in a reserve fund for unexpected events?
It does. Assuming the surplus is what we end up at the end of the year.
And is that a comfort level that staff are willing to consider, or do you traditionally expect to have more in that reserve for unexpected events?
We would hold back on our teaching staffing additional reserve funds beyond that. So by that I mean when we set our budget level for our staffing, we don't usually release it all. We hold some back pending the requirement in the fall based on increased enrollment. Now we are in a bit of a different position this year in that we're now out of funding protection. So if we do have enrollment growth, we should receive funding for that, where we've held back larger reserves in the past, because when you're in funding protection and you go up in enrollment, you have no capacity to increase your revenue. So second item bringing forward on the list here is to look at bringing the adult education program to operating on a cost recovery model. So currently it's supplemented by approximately $250,000, so that's $250,000 above what the program generates. And we're suggesting that it be cost neutral. That is also one of the questions in our survey, and when you receive the results, you'll be able to assess how the public have commented on that.
So how does that impact the client?
It means a reduction in the services offered. It impacts the client.
So is that a reduction in services, or are we charging?
It's a reduction in the service level. We have another item here which we're calling central complex administration reduction. So that's looking for savings within the boundaries of this property. We currently fund 50% of our community school coordinator out of Community Link, and 50% from our operating budget. When we had Job Action, our Community Link fund surplused some money, and we still have a surplus there. So we're suggesting for the 16-17 school year, funding the Community Link coordinator 100% out of the Community Link budget. Not the Community Link coordinator, the Community School coordinator 100% out of the Community Link budget. So in other words, using special purpose fund surplus to maintain that program, but it takes it from the operating budget and transfers it to special purpose fund. When we went through the budget year-end projection, I demonstrated that we had a surplus. Part of the surplus that we showed you of the 700 or the 844,000 was 300,000 being generated from sick leave, and we're suggesting that we take half of that amount and leaving $150,000 over and above what this year's level would be in those budgets. So we're suggesting dropping our sick leave budget by $150,000, which if it was this year to next year, we would have $150,000 surplus in that account at the end of the year. So I think that's a conservative reduction that we can make. Also showed you a surplus of $170,000 in our utilities. And we know it was a warm winter, but as a percentage of our budget, that was quite a large surplus to have on our heating and on our lighting, based on the size of the budget. So we feel comfortable that we can reduce our utilities by a further $50,000 and still be within budget, even in a year that's more of a normal year. And part of that too will be realized if we're able to dispose of any surplus properties. So if you have properties that you're currently having base heat in that you don't have next year, that starts to contribute towards savings on utilities and other areas. We have a line item here for education assistance. I'm not going to get specific on those positions, just we do have an idea, and we'll bring that in greater detail at a later time.
Trustees,
Can I just ask, education assistance, do you have an idea of the number of people that will be?
That's the equivalent of 6 4-hour a day positions. One area that we don't know, that we're hoping to know by the end of this week, is around our benefits for next year. We've budgeted with our current benefit rates for health, extended health, dental, etc. And those are all pooled within the employee groups, and our own experience history on those plans has an effect on what our rate is for the next year. It still means our rate might go up, but it's usually what occurs is that the benefit carriers overcharge us just a bit as a bit of a buffer for themselves in the year and give us a break in the next year. So we have had years where haven't had to pay benefits in September or haven't had to pay benefits in October, depending on how close the benefit providers have been with their estimates. So it's unknown. We expect to know that end of this week and might have a number that we can put in there. I'm not expecting it to be what it used to be. We have had those numbers be $250,000 as benefit premium holiday in the next year. The benefit carriers are getting better and better at projecting what they need to be charging us to adequately cover our experience history. That's why it has a question mark. It's something we're still tracking and thinking about. Another area is looking at reducing the operating budget supply allocation to our French immersion schools, and we did hear this from our French immersion parents earlier in the year. They also receive funding through the French federal grant. So a French immersion school gets supplemental funding from the French grant over and above the operating funding, and we think we can reduce their supply allocation and have them rely a little heavier on the French grant. French grant does tend to generate a surplus every year, so we feel comfortable with having more expenditures there. Okay, so my display gets a little sticky, so just give me a second here. There we go. Oh, gotta go back. It worked. Thank
sorry,
you.
can we just go back to the previous slide? Maybe not. So when you speak of reducing the community link funding by redirecting it, where would that reduction impact? Like, what are we investing in now that?
Nothing. We're using surplus funds. When we had job action, we weren't able to spend all the money out of that fund. And because it's a special purpose fund, the surpluses stay within the fund.
So it's not a general surplus, okay.
No, not a general surplus. So we're saying that we want to utilize that surplus, and one way to do it is to fully fund the community link coordinator out of that account.
Is there any other additional questions on this slide before we go to the next slide?
Thank you. For the last couple of years, out of our supply budget in the maintenance department, we have purchased a replacement vehicle. So you do see the fleet of white vans that our operations department use, and we haven't been buying new. We've been buying used vans, 1 or 2 years old, and getting really good pricing on those. And we haven't been leasing. We used to have a lease program for replacement, but it's good practice to keep renewing our vehicle fleet as they become old and obsolete and cost us a lot of money. And usually it's when there's holes in the floorboards well beyond their useful life. So what we're suggesting is, rather than purchasing next year's vehicle out of the maintenance budget, pay for it out of local capital, where we have some funds from property sales and where we'll likely have more funds from property sales. And that would free up $25,000 in that budget. This is a plus that wasn't on the list before, and again, there hasn't been anything approved here, but we think it's, we noted that all of the support staff and teacher groups have wage increases in 16-17, and we would expect that BCPC may permit the same for exempt staff and principals, vice principals. Still not permitted at the moment, but in anticipating that, we have a line item which is a plus. Each year, we budget on the staff that we have today as we start our budget process, and we move them forward to next year, and we increment everybody up the pay grid. But what tends to happen is our staff this year aren't necessarily our staff next year. People will retire between now and the end of the year, between now and the end of the year, between now and the start of next year. And we also find that the people that we have in September may not stay the entire year, and when they're replaced with a less expensive teacher, typically. So if somebody retires mid-year, the replacement cost is lower, because usually that means somebody junior gets to come off the TOC list and into a position. So we're suggesting we're going to drop our average teacher salary based on historical levels by $150,000 for leave replacements and retirements that may occur. Any questions on that one? Okay. We have $267,000 left to go on funding our employee future benefits. So that is the liability that we have for ensuring that we have money in the bank should we shut down an operation tomorrow and have to pay out every QP member and steelworker member their collective agreement retirement compensation. So what we're suggesting here is this is a 2-year item because we've committed $50,000 this year, and in our draft we have $50,000 for next year. Is making that payment this year if our surplus exceeds what we think it will exceed, and not making it if it doesn't. So if we need to grab $50,000 at the end of the year, $50,000 to roll into next year's budget, so basically what this would do is make that $750,000 surplus figure $800,000. But we would still want to make a payment if we were far enough beyond that we could afford to make a payment. So in this way, we're able to increase the surplus that we bring forward from $750,000 to $800,000. Do the same in 16-17. Don't budget for it. If we have it at the end of the year, make the payment. So that frees up $50,000 in the balancing of the budget.
Nice.
And it's just sort of, still would like to make them, understand it's important to make them. It's not required to make them, but it is a debt that we're trying to get rid of. That's what we're suggesting on that. Is that pretty clear? Provincially, districts are looking at increasing their international student program rates. It's happening everywhere. I mean, we're not the only district who's experiencing financial shortfall. And previously I showed you how such a high percentage of our revenue came from the province and such a small percentage came from other, as we went through our other pie charts. One of the areas you have an ability to affect on the other revenue is fees that are generated from non-provincial sources, which are ISP fees. So we know that around the province, districts are looking at increasing their rates, and we believe, and we'll have more discussions with the district principal when she returns from China next week, or she'll be back at work next week, because she's currently polling around the province to find out what everybody else is doing about their rates for next year. The earliest that could be implemented would be February 2017. The students coming in September have already paid and registered and know their rate. And we don't typically have a lot of mid-year as much mid-year entry as we do in September, but we do, and we do have mid-year entry for some of our short-term programs, so there is an ability to alter the registration fee rate, possibly the homestay rate, possibly the tuition rate. So we're looking at how do we do that and still remain competitive with everybody else around us. So we have a question mark there right now, and we know we need to explore that further, and we'll bring you a proposal. Under rental rate fees, that's an area we haven't increased for a while, and by rental rate I don't mean our daycares, because they are required to be cost recovery under provincial guidelines. So in other words, we're not allowed to inflate those to make money. We're supposed to be neutral, and the idea was to put as many childcare spaces in the communities as possible. But what we charge for a gymnasium rental, for example, or a field rental, we have not visited those rates in some time, and I don't believe it will be a lot to the budget, but it is something that I think if we do a little more analysis on and look again at our neighbors and look at our local groups and their rental rates, there may be something there that we can contribute towards the shortfall. Same as with as busing fees. It's one of the questions in our survey, so you'll have information from that when that survey closes. So we're putting it really there as a placeholder, as an option. We could look at increasing busing fees should we wish. We have with reconfiguration. What's occurred is our elementary schools have become larger, and it's taken them some time to grow, actually, to build to their full capacity following reconfiguration. And we have a couple schools, I think, that have now tipped the 400 mark, where we need to look at additional clerical time, and maybe shared clerical, which is a model we used this year between a couple of schools that were over 400. We had one position that went and split their time between the two. So that is an addition as well, where we think there's a couple of school communities that are beyond the capacity of their single secretary. What this means by full district closure is we really align everybody on that week to full closure. So it means on that week, custodians not in, their week is the spring break week. It means locking down as tightly as we can, even further than what we are now. And we believe there's some utility savings to that, because currently there's some heat in buildings in that week for custodial cleanup. So if we really say that week is closure, that's it. I mean, our maintenance crews are still in. That's the time they do a lot of work, because we have to spend all of our capital money by the end of March. So to lock out that group when school's not in session, that's the ideal time to go in and blitz a building and do all that capital work that needs to be done. So we're not suggesting that in the full closure. It's just align more around the custodial time, and we believe there's some utility savings there. Okay. So if we add all that up, we still are at a shortfall of 1.486 million. So I've suggested many things on the list. What I have not talked about is SER. So you see that says shortfall before student educator ratio adjustments. And there's also question marks on there. So that number can change if we consider some of those question marks. It also is the option list as we have developed it so far. We're still working. We are still early in the option process. We will have more thought time. We will have a survey that will help guide us as well. But that's where we are before any SER adjustments. So we've taken it from just under 3.3 to just under 1.5 with those what you see above. So we're going to sticky again. That's me. There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to show you is our student educator ratio history. And understand that all of these years do not include the Learning Improvement Fund, and that is supplementary, but it is still staffing in school. So if we were to look at the Learn and Improvement Fund, that drops each SER year that we've had it by about 5 points. So if you were at 17.2 this year, we're really effectively operating at about 16.7 as the actual operating SER. So the point of this slide is to really show you that it's been worse. It doesn't mean it's good, but what I'm trying to show you is that we have had years where we've had very significant SERs. If you go back to 2003, 2004, and that was a year where in 2002, 2003, we had received funding for the teacher wage increase. In 2003, 2004, they took away that funding and then didn't fund that year. So that required that was a $5.7 million year, and as far as shortfall, and that SER ended up close to 17.9. So this budget is currently developed at 17.27, which is the end bar there, which effectively, when you add lift, will be lower. And I just wanted to show you that we've operated in very many different SERs over time. And when you look at some of those years where it was also quite high, we had more restrictive class size averages in those times as well. But we had to make an average of 19 in elementary and an average of 21 in primary, which were really difficult targets when you go out of a 24 into a classroom. So those were years where we had to put a lot of staffing in just to meet those ratios. So what is the impact of increasing the SER? This is a chart which shows the number of teachers, which isn't just teachers, but when you see 429, that also includes administrators. The student educator ratio includes school-based admin as well, and non-school-based admin. It doesn't include assistant superintendents or the superintendent. It doesn't include adult ed, it doesn't include international, but that's a number there where you can start to baseline if you move your SER up a point or down a point, what it costs you or what you save. So you can see that if we were to balance it today with what we've shown you above, and if we were finished our budget process and we said all we have left is SER, we'd be at about 17.9. That's roughly what our shortfall is. That's not what we're suggesting at this point. So we're not finished budget. Obviously, we're starting with options and we're still working through it. But if we were done today, that's where we would be on an SER to balance it. So if I look at the shortfall. Because we've been talking about an SER just as a sample in our early development of 17.8, not as an ideal, not as an ending place, just as what is the value of that? We would still be short even if we went to a 17.8 of about $236,000. So we're not at a balanced budget position yet, nor do I think we should be yet, because we haven't finished our survey process, we haven't finished all of our consultations, we haven't been to advisory, we need more time to look at options, to look at other options, but that's where we're at so far.
But 17.8 at the end of the day is really 17.3.
Correct.
But if we went to 17.8, we're still looking at the potential layoff of 15 less full-time equivalent teachers? Or
12.
12, sorry, 12.
About 12, just over 12.
And is that before or after retirement or attrition?
That doesn't necessarily the number of layoffs that would have to occur. That would be the number of positions that we would be reducing, and it depends on number of retirements and who the people are for Roma and Memphis to really figure out what that line needs to be. It can mean no layoffs, and it doesn't necessarily mean layoffs. If you think that in a year we were dropping 300 students in a year, that alone is 10 to 15 teachers. So it's not. We've managed those numbers before without being in the layoff process. So I can't speak that would happen this year or not, but I just use that as a historical reference. So next steps, feedback from the survey and partner groups will be consolidated and provided to trustees. Staff will continue to work on developing options. Details of these options will be presented at the April 21st Special Board Education and Business Committee meeting. Our budget will receive first and second reading Plan to receive first and second reading on April 28th, and final reading on May the 3rd. And that's where we're at.
Questions, comments? Trustee Thorne?
You know, after going through last year, I had hoped we were going to be in a better position, but knowing that we'd come out of funding protection, I can see us going up in a year or so. You know, trying to avoid carnage this go around is going to be really, really tough. And I have faith that our community hopefully is going to understand that this isn't a position that we wanted. This is something that the government said, you guys fix our mess, because we want to open our wallet. And I'm sitting here and I'm getting awfully depressed. That's my vent of the day.
Any other comments or questions? Trustee Salisbury?
Just you say that you're going to continue to deliberate, I assume that's the district staff doing that. So, will you be bringing us other options to add in?
We hope to. We certainly hope to. We're not at a balanced place yet, and I think it'll take us some more time. Again, once we have the survey results, that helps guide us a bit as well in thinking about options, maybe things that we haven't thought about that will come through the public. There are 100 different opinions that have come in so far, and we need time to look at those, and a little bit more time as well for our team to think about things.
Trustee Smith?
When will this presentation be put on the district website?
Well, I think it will become part of this agenda package, so that way it will be on the website. We'll be able to bring that in very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it did take us some time. This was really a just-in-time presentation. It was completed today, so we weren't able to get it out to you in advance. We apologize.
So it's your intention of the next, on the 21st, is to come forward with some specific recommendations that, well, what would those recommendations look like? You're looking at 20 different items here, or are we going to have a recommendation on each item, or are you going to put a suite of items together as a single recommendation?
We will have another list of recommendations with more details behind them. It depends on, I don't think we're going to have a lot of choice. We're dealing with a very, very large number. So as far as here's 10 items, if you pick 5, that balances the budget. But there may still be things that you wish not to consider. So we'll have a balanced budget, and hopefully we can have a balanced budget beyond, so that there are choices beyond just what we have there. But I think at the end of the day, the choices will be determined by whatever we add will reduce that SER is really where we're at. If we can find some other items, that'll be the balancing item, because it's showing a very high SER right now, student educator ratio. And I think that's going to be the one that fluctuates as the balancing item.
Trustee Smith?
Just wondering if there's any other possibility to look at the capital funding area and the community links to see if there's any other funding in there that we could redirect. There's some that obviously meet that criteria that are in your list. For example, behavioral aids, that kind of thing. So, just a question: can you go to those areas again, or have you exhausted those areas?
We really have a one-time surplus from the job action year that we're utilizing a bit of that this year with the physical literacy program, and this will use a little bit more of that if we were able to do that with the community link coordinator But that's a budget that has its own challenges, and that food is a large part of it for the school meals programs, and it tends to get more and more expensive in delivering those programs. So we'll certainly look through all of our funds and all of our special purpose funds, but I think there's probably not a lot of room outside of what we're currently doing unless we don't do something there that we're currently doing.
Trustee Smith?
Are our community links funds restricted though, like we shouldn't be able to go for EAs it's more food delivery service, correct?
No, you can have behavioral education assistants there. There are some, you could take sort of, it has to be a specific type of employee. Okay. Purpose.
I have a question about operations. So at our last meeting, we had a presentation showing a significant amount of our trades will be investing in small capital improvements rentals, and those capital investments will actually pay for that salary. So if that money wasn't there, and they were just, that capital money wasn't there, and they were just doing maintenance rather than rentals, there must be a surplus in the historical operations account.
No, we have I think we have 20 or 21? Yes, 21 maintenance staff, 8 of them operating capital and are budgeted, just not put in the budget because they're going to be paid for out of capital. And it's not specifically 8 individuals, but the equivalent of 8. So we budget for 13 individuals in the operating budget. And I think, so we don't have 21 in and then they're doing capital work creating a surplus. We did show in the surplus projection that we're surplusing about $77,000, and that really is just down to the blending of how much capital work we have. And if you think that we had our crew working on the Paulson project, and they've been working on the Cowichan secondary project and all those building envelopes, so we had a little bit more capital time this year than we had in the budget. So that's probably why we have a surplus this year.
Any other questions?
Sorry, it's bad news.
Well, I just want to recognize staff for spreading the load, the impact through a variety of different areas of the district, and mitigate not a single case.